So opening a can of value worms, kind of a nod to just how difficult potentially life is going to be over the coming months in the new business acquisition side of things. I have a strong conviction that building a hypothesis is a way of increasing your win rate to the circa 50% mark, which is what we'll need to do to deliver the numbers we want to before the end of the year. If we have time in this presentation, I'm also going to provide a framework for both leaders and AEs to be thinking about expansions for the next 6 months. And the reason I say that is I keep hearing lots of organizations starting to talk about how they can leverage their install base to bridge the gap between their new business expectations that they had and where they need to get to by the end of the year. So in the next 18 and a half minutes, let's see how we get on. So when I think about a hypothesis, it has 4 components to it, which we'll go through one by one. And then the way that that's relayed back to a customer is slightly differently. So let's just unpack that. The first component of a hypothesis is to collect some pain. I call this step A. And it's, we can't do this. So it's somebody giving you a statement of an issue or a problem. And it normally comes from somebody in the organization who's expected to do stuff. All right. Sales reps who collect this kind of information will win at best 20% of the time because they just have a statement of a pain or problem. The next level, which gets us to about a 30% win rate, is they attach that to something else. It's the which means that. So we can't do this statement of an issue or a problem, which means that, or the consequence of, we can't do something else. I'll provide an example in a minute. Right? The which means that is oftentimes the executive initiative or the goal that the pain is impeding or hindering. Okay, so we've now linked it to something which an executive in an organization is going to be interested in. The third level is where you then attach that in terms of impact. You'll now get to about a 40% win rate if you really understand this information. And that's noted by as measured by. And the business impact needs to be in numbers or in dollars. You need to be able to quantify it. If you can quantify it, you can then create urgency and attach value to it. The last step in the process is despite having tried a plethora of other things, they still can't do it. Now, the reason I put this in this order is this is the order in which you normally discover these things. You discover A first, then B, then C. And at that point, you have the right to start asking questions about what have you tried to do to address this already? How did that go? How many different things did they try? Have they bought other technology? Have they tried to implement processes? Right? If you can understand that as well, you'll then be at the 50% category. So let's see how this works out if I was using Hook as an example. So what I might hear is somebody saying, we can't accurately predict which customers are at risk of churning, which is great. Okay, so I've got somebody who's got a churn problem. But to understand that at the next level, at that executive level, is understanding the impact of that. And the impact in this case is normally people find out too late, and then they have to chuck a ton of resources, burn a load of calories trying to save that customer. And I've heard horror stories of people giving away 3 months use of the software just to buy time for the organization to catch up and save the relationship. And that's all with limited resources. And that's something that execs would care about. If we quantify that problem, some of the numbers I hear, for example, are, well, our churn rates are now too high because of that. We're churning at 12%, or we have an 88% retention rate. And our goal to the board was 92%. And that's about $500,000 that we're losing in revenue. And plus the CSMs, as a result of all of this, can only manage a certain number of accounts. So now not only have I understood the impact, I've then also quantified that impact as well. That's a 40%. And then the third is finding out, well, this sounds as though it might be important. What have you tried to do to address it thus far? And, they'd be telling me, well, we've been running surveys and customer satisfactions, and we've been doing account planning and health checks, and we've been digging into the telemetry of our product to try and understand it. And yet we still can't do it. Now, how that shows itself then is you would create a slide that would start with the despite. So that was the fourth thing that we found, which was all the things they tried. So despite running all of these account planning sessions, blah, 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 you can't accurately understand where there's risk and churn, and you can't identify it in time to rectify it, which means which is the exec level pain. Expanding resources, saving customers feels a little bit too late. And then we quantify it at the end, why it's important and why it's urgent. Right? These hypothesis slides should absolutely be shown at every single meeting that you're having, that bullet point 2 that you see there. How to build them with impact, by the way, not only just are you going to be having conversations, ideally, either through your SDR, who is, if you're lucky enough to have one, who's been helping to prep up those meetings in advance, through research, what I call user info calls. So call low in an organization to do some research if this is a critical deal. You should be able to build the framework of a hypothesis before you speak to somebody with budget, authority, and need. Okay. So having got that hypothesis, you then show it in every single meeting. And make sure that if you're showing it to an executive, as it says there at the end, that you are never using the present tense, because executives don't live in the now. We're all starting to think about the end of the year. We're already starting to think about planning for next year, and quantify it. Not in terms of descriptive language. It's not a big problem. It's not an important issue. It has a number, a dollar, or a percentage attached to it. The final thing I may say, for some of you who are selling tools that might be used across different parts of the organization, is rarely you may end up with multiple hypotheses that relate to specific executives. So a hypothesis for a CFO might be slightly different to, say, for example, the Chief Development Officer, if you had a proposition that was relevant to both parties. So be prepared on the odd occasion to have a hypothesis for both. Right? Okay, so in summary, what we've talked about there is to be able to create a win rate that's significantly higher than what you've got now, is to create this North Star hypothesis that allows you to show the prospect in every single meeting that you are focused on the outcomes and initiatives that are important to them, and then to remind them why they're so important by having a value, aka urgency, attached to it. All right. There is a hidden slide in this deck, which I'm sure will go out afterwards as James shares the material. He's very good at doing that. That has a little bit more detail again about each and every single one of those 4 points, just so the audience here has as much information as possible. So the second part of my presentation is to focus on expansions. And previous to this, expansion seems to be an all-encompassing term for anything to do with selling to a customer. They're not created equal. Some of them will happen and some of them need to be worked. And I've created here a brand new framework that's hopefully going to make it into my book that I'm trying to write at the moment, that allows organizations to think about expansions where the money is and what needs to be in place to make them to happen. This is a busy slide deliberately because this is work in progress, but I'm hoping for both the leadership audience and also for the AE audience that this will be useful. The premise of this model is to recognize down the left-hand side here that there are three types or three starting points for expansions with existing customers. The first one is customer orders. Customer phones you up, simply says, we need a couple of extra seats, or we need a couple of extra ABCs with your platform, probably in a SaaS environment. We love those. They're great. They come in. There's no selling required. If at all possible, an organization should try and work out to have some form of self-service mechanism to facilitate that. The second one, and this accounts for 46% of all expansion dollars in the SaaS industry, is where somebody will place an additional order at a critical event, typically a renewal. So in the annual renewal conversation, we look to have an uplift. The third and the rarest is the AE initiated deal. This is the panacea of what organizations who have employed growth AEs or account executives or renewal reps are looking for, which is we're so entrenched in an organization, we can identify a need similar to the way that new business folks do within an account and go and harvest and farm that appropriately. This is the proactive AE initiated deal. Across the top, what we're doing here is categorizing, is it an upsell or a cross-sell? Or is it, and also the persona that we're going after. And I'm playing around with some kind of analogy here, which is, is it the same room? So that would be the same buyer buying more of the same product. It's traditionally called an upsell. Down the corridor, which is the same buyer but a different product. So maybe in the next door office is kind of the analogy I'm drawing to here. And then the second segment here is recognizing that there may be different buyers who would buy the same product from you in the company, or a different buyer buying a different product. So different building, cross town effectively. So the color coding that exists in this table relates to the top left and top right. Top right I've never seen. Top left, I don't believe anybody should be paid commission for. And we shouldn't be measured, shouldn't be part of our quotas. It's more financial modeling in this required. Typically, they're very small orders, which is what the £1 sign relates to, and there's no selling required. When we think about with the same buyer, same product, to get more revenue at renewal, these are the things that need to be in place. Our customer needs to be healthy. There probably needs to be some latent demand. In other words, they might be slightly over their subscription. We just had no way of tracking it and getting them to order it beforehand. And somebody needs to remember to ask. And what we tend to find is these transactions are slightly bigger than the initial ones. Where you want to, with the same buyer and selling the same product, have an A-initiated relationship, which is what I believe commission should be paid for, you need to have a proactive relationship, be engaged, and the CS, customer success, and the whether it's a growth AE or the new business AE, needs to be aligned on what the account strategy is for that and have some awareness of what the white space might be. Right. I'm not going to go into the others in as much detail simply because time doesn't allow us, but just to pick through these darker yellow ones to help people understand what I'm coming at from. So let's go across the AE initiated deals. If you want to sell to different solutions to the same buyer and you want to have that AE initiated, you absolutely have to have a proactive, healthy relationship that still keeps and has the executive who was involved in the original purchase engaged. That's tough. Normally, the person who buys your solution is a change agent. Having bought the solution, we would normally migrate into business as usual, and they would naturally disengage and go off to fix the next problem. If you don't have a roadmap in place that helps them to see that you can fix future problems for them, in other words, you have vision lock, they will not stay engaged. And if that doesn't happen, then you need to make sure that you find the business as usual executive who can help maintain the vision lock for you. If you get this right, you will have the opportunity to do triple pound sign deals, bigger deals that will allow you to blow your number out. Okay. Let's look at the Holy Grail, which is trying to sell your solution in a different building or across town, to use the tonality we've got at the top there. In most of them, what you will see, especially in that third column, is senior people. You need to still have maintained a relationship with them. If you're having quarterly business reviews or account reviews and you're only getting the folks in the coalface engaged, you haven't got the tone of those right. You probably haven't got the right resources in your own company involved. You have to have the exec sponsor engaged. To be able to sell to different people at renewal is premeditated. It doesn't happen by accident. You have a compelling event, a transaction date that your customer is aligned behind. If it takes you 6 months to sell a new business deal, it will take you 6 months to sell to a different buyer the same product in your organization. The reason I say that is, let's say you start 6 months beforehand and everybody's fully aligned with 3 months to go. You may be able to make it an early renewal and do the upsell at that point, and everybody in your organization will give you a round of applause. But if not, they will simply wait until that kind of critical moment arrives, right? If you want initiated different building sales, by that stage, you will have to have a growth team. People who are specifically focused on expansion dollars, are not distracted by new business, love farming, and you will likely have put in place an enterprise contract. An enterprise contract will have in it things like a discount table. As they buy more stuff, they'll understand that they can get a better price for the solution as they go. You initiated this transaction at the beginning with a view for growth. I see a mistake a lot of companies make is when they land deals, they haven't put in place the contractual framework to expand it. In other words, they had a view that they wanted to expand it. They just never contracted with the customer in a way that allowed it to happen. Okay. The benefit of these two bottom right ones, by the way, this is where the money is in a huge way. The bottom right, you need to be thinking about, I've used some of my old Oracle and SAP terminology, unlimited license agreements, enterprise license agreements. These are agreements that are way beyond the enterprise kind of side of things. They are expecting you to sell across the business. Some tools have that potential. If you can get to that pace where you're a corporate standard, where your solution is being discussed and talked about at board meetings and contributes to those conversations, then you have the right kind of solution to effectively make your way across the entire organization. So in summary, what I've given you here is, one is an appreciation that not all expansion deals are created equal. Two is there is a different approach to achieving some of them to others, different levels of difficulty, but also bigger prizes to go after. And some of them have to be premeditated. You have to think about the potential of a customer at initial signature if you want to open the avenues for potential expansion down the line. I wish everybody a huge amount of luck following winds, good weather, and from a sales sense, to get your win rates up to that 50% mark by using the hypothesis approach, and happy hunting in your expansion opportunities as you look to smash out your numbers in the year. Thank you.